this is not a continuation of the drinking panel last night. Before we start, just want to ask, first of all, how many of you are from the region? Okay. Western Europe, anyone? All right, cool. So before we move to introduction of all of us, introduction of the panelists, I just want to show you, my name is Ruth Koleva, okay, so I'm moderating the panel. I'm just going to introduce myself, nothing else. I just want to show you quickly short presentations to give a bit of a context to this panel. So since last year, we conducted, meaning we, my organization in Bulgaria, conducted a study on the geographical underrepresentation of the Balkan region within the wider European ecosystem. And we discovered some information, some statistics, which were later verified by the European Commission in July. And we've presented this data 3 times already in European Parliament, Commission, in another European initiative. And we will most probably continue to do that in 2025. It is important to start with this because the panel's topic is unmuting the Balkans. And before we talk about how we are trying to do that, it's important to see historically what is the problem. So we're seeing the screen. We're not? Okay, cool. So the European Union, of course, one of the main priorities, diversity and inclusion. Many of the main events in regards to music and culture have very upfront policies on inclusion and diversity. And we're seeing gender balance, gender minorities, LGBTQ, people of different color being, quite put to the front, but there is a vast underrepresentation of people from specific geographical regions. So for those of you, this is more for people who don't know what the Balkans is, but you can see the map there showing what exactly is sort of covered in our region, to which I could add also the European part of Turkey, which is also part of the Balkan Peninsula. They're also bordering to Greece and, and Bulgaria, so we do kind of consider them, very close to us historically, culturally, and all that. The underrepresentation statistics. So we analyzed many of the main music events in Europe, and I'm just going to give you stats from some of the biggest ones. And we have Eurosonic, which this year had, from the whole Balkan region, 65 million people, only 14 artists. You can see the statistics per country. While it's important to note that Croatia and Slovenia have a duplicity. So there's one band, it's called Freekind. They're considered both Croatian and Slovenian. And they were also performing last year. They were performing again in 2024 because they were nominated for Music Moves Europe Award, and they won. It's the same for Bulgaria. So in factuality, you actually have two new emerging artists presented from Bulgaria and one new from Croatia, to be realistic in the statistics. For comparison, Romania, a country of 20 million citizens, only had one artist performing in Eurosonic, while Iceland, with a population of less than 300,000, had 4. Ireland, which has 5 million people, had 10 artists. So it does not, quite make sense to us. Why is it like that? The other main events, Womex had no participation from the Balkans until 2024. Jazz Ahead has not had any participation from our region. Reaper Band in 2023 had 1 artist from Serbia. Telling Music Week had 3 from Serbia, North Macedonia, and Greece. The Great Escape, Mama, and Line Check did not have any. This is a bit of a stat of how Eurosonic We're pointing it out because it's the main event in Europe for emerging music. How many artists were presented from different countries. One of the things is that many of the participants in Eurosonic were participating based on the EBU partnership, so they are selected through either a competition or internal selection from the local radio station that is a member of EBU, which does create sometimes obstacles because, for example, the Bulgarian contest until this year did put like a mandatory rule that the song should be in Bulgarian language, which for an export project sometimes creates confusion because it's putting some sort of linguistic barrier. Call of inclusivity, we will discuss this a bit in the panel. Then the digital challenges, and now I'm going to switch to the okay. This is something we did. This is something we did last month. So it was conducted between 10th of October and November 5th. It's about the impact of Spotify's 1,000 streams threshold. It's very important to note that our region is segmented, so each country is kind of, on its own, even though we're trying to unify and try to be connected. But during this study, during this survey, this research, we had 76 or over 70 responses from independent labels within the Balkans, which the majority said they either have significant impact from this new threshold or slightly negative impact, meaning that if this rule is in some ways beneficial in Western Europe or the developed countries, we have examples of successful artists within the Balkans who does not reach the 1,000 streams threshold because there's not enough user base. So this rule should be very much looked upon from the EU, and we should find ways to work out how to dissolve it, because it's, and we stand by this, we believe it's very much discriminatory. Much of the suggestions that we see is we should find regional curators, or we should have dedicated playlists to support the region, because this is also creating an environment in which the Balkan cultural identity and diversity is not seen or heard outside of our region. And the last short presentation I want to show for people who are not part of this region is about the festival and music business. So we're seeing massive growth in the last couple of years from different festivals, events, but also in the live music industry. You can see some statistics about, again, repeating how big the region is. These are some of the bigger festivals in the region. You have Untold Festival in Romania, which by statistics has 420,000 visitors. Exit Festival in Serbia, which has 200,000. Sunny Hill in Kosovo, 100,000. And Music Festival, Croatia, 100,000. Electric Castle in Romania, which also has 100,000 visitors, and some others. Of course, in each and every country there are major festivals, and the market for festivals is definitely growing. The recording music industry, Bulgaria for last year is the highest ranking growth within Europe. 44% growth for just 1 year. It was 23 the year before, meaning that we are definitely seeing more paid subscription, more physical sales, sync is somewhat on the rise, and this creates a lot of potential for development within the whole Balkan countries. You can see the recording industry growth in some of the key markets. So Bulgaria is mentioned because it was kind of in the forefront in IFPI's global report. You have Turkey, which is almost 19 million market size. Croatia is close to 20 million, 19.9 million for 2023. Physical sales in Croatia, 3.7 million, which is 6.5 growth only for vinyl. Just a bit of a context for those of you who are coming to the Balkans for the first time. You can see why there's a lot you can do here in the sense of touring. The distances between all the major cities, so Skopje, Pristina, Bucharest, Tirana, Belgrade, Athens, Budapest, Istanbul, Thessaloniki, then you have Zagreb and Ljubljana. They're in a very close proximity. And those of you who perhaps have, gone on the road know that now it's much more feasible than some years ago to get a van, go on tour, and you have, 15, 20 cities that you can cover. And why does that make sense? The costs to do a tour in the region are much lower than in Western Europe. So a van rental in the Balkans is 50 to 70 euros a day, while it's almost double in Western Europe. Backline equipment is 25 to 40% lower than Western Europe. Fuel costs are lower. Food prices are much lower as well. And accommodation is 3 times lower. So if you want to do a tour, you have much better conditions. If you are a starting artist, emerging artist, or even a medium scale, there is much more potential here in this region to make money out of touring than compared to other places in Europe where costs are very high and the conditions working with the smaller or grassroots venues are more difficult. So this is the overview. I try to be quick so I don't take all the time to introduce our panelists. Let's start with George.
Presentation?
George Perot.
Okay, George, French
from
Greek,
Athens.
Meso events. We act like a hub for mostly, let's say, export ready artists and the ecosystem around live, but also service providers. And we organize the Athens Music Week.
Okay, I'm going to start with a question for you, just straight up. You work a lot with innovation, right? Could you please tell us, how does that affect the development in the region? Because we did not see any of that on any of the presentations. I wanted you to explore more. What is our benefit working in technology and arts here, in the cultural industries in general?
Yeah. Well, in a nutshell, I want to say that I really like your initiative. I have a slightly, let's say, parallel approach on it because I'm older and I'm half French, half Greek. So, yeah, the reason I'm here is I believe I'm Greek. I love the region, and I had to prove that's how I started and get the attention of the Western world long time ago already. And to go directly on innovation, for me, innovation is not only technological, innovation is on how we can find solutions, especially in our countries, which for structural reasons, geographical reasons, historical reasons are less competitive, smaller countries, and geographically far away. So, innovation. Because of all those projects I've did in the past, we spoke about those 2 days, many of you heard about European project, most, HEMI, other things. You have to realize that this is 5, 6 years old in the region. Most of our companies were not, let's say, rich enough to engage with the self-financing. So we were going as partners in smaller scale projects, and the leaders were all from Germany, France, UK, when UK was still in Europe. And yeah, and we had to compete in a market which was big, where they had infrastructures, the government had a cultural diplomacy policy, a strategy which was keeping for a long time. And all the calls where we were partners, for us as Greeks, let's say the goal was to have some Greeks joining those calls. But our channels of communication within Greece and our suggestions to join a call in order to travel 1,000 kilometers away for a flirt, because usually it's a one-night stand when you do those things, was not really attractive. So what we tried to do in the sense of innovation was, first of all, to create what you've heard also the last days, a kind of community, because our sector is fragmented. So when you speak to a classical person or to a company, to a promoter which makes money with concerts, they don't really care about the ecosystem. So you say, yeah, we want to represent Greece, but okay, at the time they didn't care. And long story short, you all heard all your friends that have left your country to go and have a real work in UK or in the United States. And if you put this, to do it in a nutshell, right, to try to answer in that question, well, our goal was to prove that, because we know the kids are very educated in the region, also for an historical facts. I mean, we had dictatorships, some had communism, and the parents wanted to be sure that the kids could become something. Long time ago, it was a lawyer or doctor. Now it's a scientist. And there was a lack of entrepreneurship. Many companies from abroad told us, you have very good talent, but there's a lack of entrepreneurship, on one hand. Two, there was no ecosystem. Then we had the band saying, I don't have a manager, or I want to go to a showcase. And because all this generation comes from those who are 50 years old or plus, again, they were all looking always at UK, overseas. That was the direction as a musician to make a career. So we had to tell them, hey, what about Bulgaria? Hey, Logging is doing 10 years a conference in Skopje, in Macedonia. So we had to deal with this kind of innovative approach, and we had to prove that there was an interest. So we started to mapping, and we realized 5, 6 years ago that it wasn't easy. So innovation is to change the angle of view, to try to commute the different sectors, and the results, all of us are here, most, Hemi, and so many other projects, prove that the region has a potential. But I think it's recent. It's the good time to do something, and I pass you the floor. Sorry, I didn't answer the question.
We had a conversation on the phone for like an hour and a half a couple of days ago, fighting, and he was explaining, we need to do more, and I'm like, we're actually doing more, and I think it's going well. Claire, I would like you to introduce yourself, and then I'm going to ask a question to both you and Ian in regards to how the Balkans are perceived from Western Europe, from the UK. Of course, we know the sort of the how do you say, the gossip, or the official statement that Brexit did happen because of all the immigration from our region, but we just want to know, what are the stereotypes, and are we starting to overcome them?
Well, so I'm Claire, and I'm director for the British Council of the Western Balkans. Do you want to go to Ian next, or do you want to go one by one?
You can answer, then we'll go move to Ian.
Okay. So I think it's an interesting concept around this idea of the Balkans as an identity, and I'm not entirely sure how helpful it is, because I don't think that people in the UK really, it's a very big, amorphous, non-tangible thing, the Balkans, and so I'm not sure how helpful it is to focus on it as an entity, because if you think of successful stories and narratives and how people have combated negative stereotypes, they tend to come much more from a tangible sense of place. So if you look at some examples around the region of what Sunny Hill has done for Pristina, what Exit Festival has done for Novi Sad, these are festivals organised, and there's many, many examples, Taxirat, DocuFest, the dance festival in Belgrade. But these are run by people who have come from those places and who have a deep sense of pride in those cities and towns. And they do much more for countering any stereotypes by bringing people internationally to those places to engage. And our own British Council research shows that if you take part in a cultural event with another country, your liking for that country will increase by between 15 to 18%. So actually, yes, you can tackle cultural diplomacy on a bigger level. You can have government initiatives, and they're also very good examples of that. Kosovo had a digital diplomacy campaign where they wanted to change the narrative that when you looked up Pristina online, you got photos of war and deprivation. So they got citizens to flood the internet with more positive images, because that's the only way you can change a stereotype, is you've got to take control of the narrative and present your own narrative and tell the story that you want to tell. But I don't think it's possible to tell a story about the Balkans. You know, I think you need to tell a story about Skopje or about Belgrade or about Novi Sad. And I think culture can be hugely helpful and influential in enabling you to do that. If you look at the UK, you have the example of Manchester and the example of Liverpool. Manchester was seen as being very deprived, crime-ridden, broken place, and the story that regenerated Manchester came out of Joy Division, the Hacienda factory records. And that's what created the youth culture that created a brand for Manchester that at first the city was quite anti because of what it brought with it in terms of drugs or crime. But then they saw that it was actually really changing a narrative about a city, and students wanted to go and study at the universities. And in the case of Liverpool, they had the EU City of Culture in 2008, and parallel here with Skopje because you're due to have it in 2028. And they really used that example to totally retell a story about a city, and that city is now seen as being one that has its foundations built on culture and creativity. But they are very tangible senses of place, and the people who change those narratives are musicians and people who have a strong sense of civic pride in a place. So I think the Balkans is, I mean, what is the Balkans? It's a very, very diverse range of countries. I mean, no one kind of goes, I identify as being a citizen of the Balkans, really.
I think we kind of do.
But how do you explain it? How do you really get into, I mean, it's very, very, very wide geographical area?
Well, if you were at the drinking panel yesterday, you would know. No, of course. I mean, there are cultural, there are historical specifics for each and every country, but we do have this sort of unity between us. I tend to think so.
I think
I
it
hope
might
so.
be hard for outsiders to identify with something so widespread. I think people find it easier to identify with a very tangible sense of place. And if you want to create a narrative, you need to have it firmly rooted in a sense of place that you can visit.
It
and
is
see.
also, because you did mention digital, and I think there's, thousands, millions of memes and, sort of jokes for the Balkans that only us understand, that are very kind of similarities and, upbringing, big family dinners and all that. So yes, we are different, even in terms of different types of religion, histories, of course, feuds and war, but there are certain things in the cultural identity that I think applies to many of us. And Rakia, of course. Ian.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle. So those of you that don't know me, I come from a very varied background as a musician producer, but I also started 2 agencies around 25 years ago. One of them is called Fusion, and the reason I'm mentioning that is it's folk roots fusion. And I worked with lots of artists from the Balkans over that period of time, but I'm sort of dual-based both in UK and Austria. So what I'm going to talk about now is the perception of trying to bring those artists to the UK and also bring those artists. The agencies work literally all over Europe. And the interesting thing was, originally I got a lot of contacts from Chantel many years ago when we were in a bar somewhere together drinking and enjoying the music. And as such, I had bands from Greece, from Macedonia, actually. I also made a couple of small conferences in Varna a long time ago. Yeah, there were 2 music conferences in Varna, a guy called Yasin from Senderman did. And the interesting thing was that as I was working with festivals, everything from Glastonbury to WOMAD and various festivals in between, and lots of small cultural centres, there wasn't a perception as such as a band being from the Balkans or a multimedia outfit that I was working with were from the Balkans. They just wanted to know who they were. But as time went on, some of the questions that I was asked were, well, are they going to get here? There were some stereotypes that we were fighting against. Can they afford to get here? Obviously, as time's gone on, then we've got problems with visas and immigration in the UK in particular. I'm a UKVI licensed sponsor, so I do a lot of work on visas, etc. And I think the interesting thing is that the number of acts that I had approaching me directly, there were not many from the Balkans that were directly contacting me as a UK agent that was working, I'm pretty well known, I'm working all over Europe. And the main way I was able to work with those people was that I'd seen them at maybe a showcase, or I'd seen them at a gig somewhere, as I travelled a lot. And there seemed to be a little bit of a resistance to working out who to approach. Now, I'm not talking about the large agencies. I'm talking about the small independents who are willing, or more willing, to sell the act and try and get them out there. I found that as well in different ways across Central Western Europe, which is mostly where I've worked, although I've worked in Romania and Ukraine as well occasionally. And there was a sort of almost an invisible barrier. I don't know what other people think, but certainly the artists that I got generally came through other artists, Western European artists who knew me and then said, hey, you should speak to Ian. Or one of the other agencies in the UK, things like Midnight Mango, a very good agency in the UK that work all across Europe. So I think part of the problem about unmuting the Balkans in terms of music and creativity is the ability to get out there to musicians from Macedonia, Romania, wherever, and say to them, you can contact these guys and really make a connection. Because it was always me going out to get the acts, and I am pretty well known, and I didn't get many coming back at me, which was a bit strange. Things have changed over the last 20, 25 years, of course. There are far more showcase festivals, there are far more conferences, and there is a really good infrastructure across many countries about getting the information out there as to how you can progress your career. The other thing I should say, I'm the Upbeat programmer for Waves in Vienna, and great creative European program, and I managed to program some Balkan artists recently, which is really cool. But I think the main thing is education and confidence. The confidence to give artists the confidence to contact agencies and people who are going to be able to actually get them out there. There's not so much resistance from the promoters. If it's a good act, whether it's in folk, roots, world, jazz, blues, rock, pop, it doesn't matter. They don't care where they come from. They don't want to know, can they get there? How much is it going to cost? And are they reliable? And those are the three things that I tended to find as I went through my professional career.
Do you have any recent examples if that has kind of, because you did mention there's more events popping, but more artists being kind of on your radar from this region?
Yeah, ironically, Womex, you mentioned. I was in Manchester where I used to live in the 80s, so I recognise some of what you were talking about. Yeah, I used to go to the Hacienda. Yeah, there were quite a few, and actually part of the Upbeat showcase, there was, I think it was a Macedonian act, I can't remember.
Zarina?
Yeah. And ironically, this is important actually, because I don't like to mention the Brexit word because it's painful. But since Brexit, of course, there are lots of problems with people accessing the UK for work, and they had problems with visas, for example. And so, sorry to come back to your question. Yes, there were more people associated with that particular artist, but not generally, because obviously we're living in a very difficult world at the moment, and cost of living crisis, etc., means it's very difficult for artists from the Balkans. You mentioned the differentials in hire, etc., and costs. And if they have to come in to Western Europe and not hire a van or whatever within the Balkans to get there, it's really expensive. And there is a real barrier there. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I think I've wandered off somewhere into the
no,
ether.
what you're saying is anyhow quite valuable. The question was if you have, and you did answer that, if you have more like recent artists that are coming on your radar.
Oh, sorry.
Within the scope of work you're doing from this region.
Exactly what I just
said.
said for Womex.
You did mention Zarina, so that's
she was great, really good.
Bojan, could you please introduce yourself and also elevate a bit about the world music and the positioning of Balkan world music within the wider European ecosystem?
So my name is Bojan Đorđević, for those who don't know me. Besides doing 3 festivals in Serbia, which 2 of them are world music, one is the older one in Belgrade already for 12 years, and the younger one in Novi Sad for 3 years. I'm also have been managing Balkan bands for 25 years, so I have been touring and going to the conferences, and I did all this way through. So I will stay on the world music, as this is my priority when the so-called business is. I will also have a question for your statistics about, was it only for 2024, or it was for some previous years, WOMEX?
It was for 2023 and the 3 years prior.
Okay.
And Jazz Ahead, we analyzed since 2008.
Okay. So I will suggest that for your statistics, you have to follow those bands who played, how many gigs they had afterwards in the Western Europe.
We did try to get that.
Yeah, that will be very interesting to find out, because I say that, okay, the showcase places are a great place to, for the bands, but they have to be really prepared. They should have somebody to represent. It doesn't have to be an agent or manager, it could be somebody from the band, but they have to have the strategy and to know many things, how all these things are working. I mean, you can be selected for the showcase, but also what we lack in this region is the knowledge how to do this kind of stuff. I have been in the jury for several showcases and have approached, and I know the statistic. For example, Hungarian artists, they know what to do, then they apply in the huge numbers. Then from Serbia, Kosovo, Bosnia, they don't know anything about it. They don't know how to do this kind of stuff. So this kind of some kind of tutorship, or just explain them. And also, they don't know how to find out. I think this is also the duty for the local organizations to spread the word about all this kind of stuff. We have Upbeat, which is like 20 showcase festivals coalition, and how many in Serbia they know about. Also, all the countries are quite different. I mean, Slovenia is exception. Bulgaria is now becoming really very good example how the things can develop. And also we have seen your Minister of Culture, very nice person and great, and we hope to have somebody like this in next 20 years. But also, besides this kind of education, also the strategy, and I will say, we don't have to focus on the big showcase festivals. Let's try to do the small steps first. How I was doing with the bands that I work with, I try to find the regional agents, because they know their market, and then they can help you much more. They can help you on the visa and stuff. But the other very important issue for us who are not in European Union, what are the musicians can do with this regulation that they can be only 90 days within 6 months in the Schengen. That means that for 3 months they have to stay home and work only at home, or the countries which are non-EU. This is quite discriminatory. There is no solution at this moment. Absolutely. Unless you have to make some criminal acts. So this is very important. I mean, UK is completely another issue. I will not take it. But also, when you consider this kind of big events, it costs a lot. And then, for example, for WOMEX, it's always far away from the Balkans. So I completely understand that cost like 5,000–6,000 euros to get the band, plus all the promotion and stuff. And then, of course, I mean, many.
We did have it in Thessaloniki some time ago.
Yes, so my suggestion was, why don't we do WOMEX 26 in Sofia, 27 in Belgrade, it's Expo, and 28 in Skopje, it's European Culture Capital.
And just hijack it afterwards.
No, just let's do it, the 3 years program.
Let's do our WOMEX.
Yes, that's also another thing. Why do we have to rely? Why don't we do something like this, try to bring the stuff? I mean, there are these huge festivals, and they mostly don't care about the world music from Balkans at all. I mean, how many...
Hey, what about jazz? You know,
I mean,
let's not even touch about jazz, because jazz did come to the region in the early 20th century, and we're completely isolated. Jazz from the Balkans is really completely
But
underrepresented.
also, how do we exchange our stuff? I mean, how many Bulgarian jazz acts have played in Serbia ever?
I can tell a few.
Yeah,
They play every year. 3 bands play at Nishville, so.
Yeah, only in Nishville, because this is...
No, it's also in Belgrade. I mean, we have good
Well,
statistics.
who played in Belgrade? I mean, it's not the case. I mean,
I
Cetna was
did.
there. Yeah, so, no. So, I mean, also like in Croatia, I mean, these quite unpopular scenes, and they're very unknown, so, okay, I understand, but let's try to present them somehow. There are no jazz showcase festivals in the region, as far as I know. Mostly
There
it's...
But it's few, yeah. It's
Yeah, few. Yes, not enough. I mean, I know 3 showcase festivals in Belgrade only, but none of them is jazz. It's like all around. So we have tried to do it within all these structures. Jazz is one structure, so they don't have the same idea how to do the things and how to support each other, but they are connected in between. You have European Jazz Network, where there are partners from every country, and they don't care about it. I mean, how many acts? There was this AGN conference in Sarajevo 2022, and there were representation of the Balkan acts. But then the next one, which they got the money from European Union, is Morocco, and then where
We
else?
had
I
the
mean,
European Jazz Network in Sofia 2 years ago.
yes, but yeah, that was EGN conference.
Yeah.
I mean, they do it every year, but this was a kind of showcase of the Balkan artists.
I don't know if anyone got booked. I don't think anyone did.
Yeah, that's what I say. I mean, we have to try to go to the smaller places, not to go to the major festivals, because, okay, this is the exposure, but not many people are doing. So I will say, make few steps, try to work together, and also within our countries, we have to work together, and we don't.
Oh, I actually completely disagree with you. I think we do.
I knew.
I think we're...
That's why you asked me to join the panel.
Yes, it's good to have someone to disagree with. But can we put the screen on, just quickly? Možemo pustíme ekranat? Okay, waiting. Do you agree with me that we're working together?
We're trying.
We are trying. Fran, I'm sorry for taking so long to get to you, but I just want to show something because I think it's interesting. Ќе успееме ли да го пуштиме екранот? Извини? Не се знае. Okay, while we're waiting. Само да дојде видео гај. Он си отишел негде. Okay, so recently, we came across this article, which is, I think, quite important. It's not only an article, it's been quite a topic in different places. So there's this new movie by Apple TV, which is called Wolves. It's starring Brad Pitt and George Clooney, which also are their own companies. Here it is. They produced the film. And in this film, there's this really confusing moment. There's a scene which is supposedly Albanian mafia, but the Albanian mafia guy is Croatian, he's speaking Croatian, is a Croatian actor, Zlatko Buric.
Yeah.
And his name is Dimitri, which is not really the most Croatian name, right? So is this really interesting poll? It was like, yeah, let's make a villain, but we're tired of having the Russians being the villain. They're at war, so that's quite obvious. The Muslims, yeah, that's also kind of exhausted. So, let's put the Balkans. They've been, accepting everything that's been going and happening, coming down their way.
Let's go the exotic way. Let's mix a perfect villain out of all of these countries. But we are still happy that they remember us.
That's a good one, because imagine the level.
No, we have that. It's also, I think, a Balkan thing. When you seen a movie and the end credits go, and when you see an itch surname, then you say, "Oh, that's ours."
I always Google them when I see Ivanova or something. I'm like,
Yeah. Who is that? Who is that?
that's
That's ours.
and I find them, and they really turn out to be Bulgarian, and I'm always like, I discovered a new interesting person.
You have like a whole career of most famous Croatian actor called Rade Šerbedžija, who is famous for playing Russian in American films. So
Very accurate.
yeah,
One thing though, there is no single representation of the Balkans in big Hollywood or Western European, whatever we can call them, from the UK being the second biggest market. There's no representation of the Balkans in anything other than corruption, mafia, war criminals, and prostitution. Can anyone name one? Sport? In which film? I'm talking about films now. The sports, yes, of course. Thank God we have the sports. Sparta.
Yeah.
Alexander the Great.
Okay.
the Greeks are
I'm removing Greece now. No, good point, of course. But
the old one things.
yes, let's remove, ancient Greece. Thank God for ancient Greece to have some nice representation.
well, we had like Mamma Mia 2 was filmed in Vis in Croatia.
And also Game of Thrones, but
Of course, in Dubrovnik.
is
yeah,
it
throughout
the
Croatia?
culture of these countries, Balkan countries, except Greece, represented in anything else?
Well,
Because I really asked around and no one could point anything.
I'm not sure. But
Even ChatGPT, he was very.
I'm not sure how to explain this. So, back to Greece. If you look at all these countries, we didn't brand our music. When you say Greek music, we have the sense what that means. Yeah, and it was only one movie who made it happen. It was one composer, Mikis Theodorakis. Yeah, so
40 years ago. And
40
it's still
years,
the same.
and it's still the same. If you say somebody like Italian music, they know what you are speaking about. But when they say Croatian music, we didn't brand ourselves. We didn't brand our music to be something specific outside of the Mediterranean or Balkan region.
Well,
But
they
we
do
have Gypsy
consider.
Brass. We have Gypsy Brass, which is connected to the Balkan. All the Balkan bands,
Yeah.
like 10 years ago, it were in the section of
Yeah, Gypsy
Gy-
Brass
Gypsy Balkan.
or
That's
Goran
the-
Bregovic and
another
Emir
stereotype,
Kusturica,
yes.
and that's everything we have.
Yes.
People get really shocked when you say jazz music existed here 120 years ago. They're like, really? And you're like, yeah, there's this historical information. The orchestras came here. Anyway, but regarding the branding, I wanted to ask you and then continue the conversation to the rest of the panelists. You are running SHIP conference, SHIP festival in Šibenik, beautiful place. If you have not been, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing conference, but also the city's gorgeous. You have had last year 1,000 applications from all over the world, and of course you present a lot of regional talent.
Yes.
How would you explain the branding? Like, what are you presenting, and how are we presenting the different colors of the Balkans? Because that's, in reality, what you're doing, what I think I'm also doing, and what George is doing, and Pin is doing as well. So let's talk about that.
So we were established by the Croatian Association of Performers. So we have to have all the varieties of music presented there. That's one thing. The other thing is that we have 42 acts, and half of them are Croatian, and half of them are from abroad. And we want this to be spread out geographically, gender equality, all of the, in the right way, and also genre equality also. So we don't have a slot, 2 slots for a single country. We have that only with receptions. So we're developing in that kind of way, but we want to be international. It's not like we want to underline maybe Balkans or something like that. We didn't have that.
My question was more in the genre specific, because we're talking about now the, you know, the ha,
Yeah.
and then the Goran Bregovic, but the bands that are playing ship in all these cool conferences in the region are so diverse in genre. So what is Balkan music? It's not really, you know, the stereotypes that we were just discussing from, you know, what Hollywood has been portraying us or what people abroad think, but you have...
Yesterday we had a country band playing here from Czech Republic. So
Country.
Yeah.
And we've also had one from Slovenia playing country music.
yeah,
you know.
so it's amazing. You can go through it. The music transcends the countries that you are in. I think, from my point of view, what we lack is the infrastructure. We don't have the infrastructure to teach them. We are a music export office, which was formed 2 years ago, and we are quite proud of our development, and we are quite proud of our results. If you see like 3 bands in Eurosonic from a small place like Croatia to 2.5, because one is half with brother Slovenians, but still it's development. It goes, the trend is going upwards, so we are quite happy with that.
George wants to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to connect this with your initial question with innovation. So I'm 52 almost, and I started the first export office in Greece in '99.
I just, when you said I'm 52, I thought you were going to say I'm going to retire.
And in '99, when we started to try and find a way to export artists, first of all, those who had the money were mainstream artists in, let's say, the Greek pop. Not turbo folk, but Greek pop, not really exportable. At the time in France, because I was half French, we were working with Fnac stores, you know, like the Virgin mega stores, which were distributors. And the only distribution for Greek music at the time in France was through a distributor from North Africa. The only one in '99. So, you know, initially we could be pissed, then because we were from there, we said, okay, there's a reason, what can we do? So we started marketing. Long story short, we managed to do some things, and then in 2012, we became the robbers of Europe. So two, as we say in Greek, let's start all over again because I don't speak to you, because you stole the money, crisis, financial crisis, no money, zero. And then it became fun to go and see poor people, so we got a tourism again, and now we're back on top, and everybody likes us because we are a miracle, financial miracle. Now, in terms of strategy, governmental one, still nulla. We had a fake euro export, now luckily, I hope we will manage to do something correct. Lack of infrastructure yet, and the innovation, Ruth, was, I believed, like thinking of us not as creators, but on the business side, I think we had to reverse the engineering, and the innovation was Hemi, most, let's show them, let's make these guys come to us, and let's create those conferences, let's start negotiating together with us, and let's do what you said at the beginning. Let's put the bridges between the venues, because it's not granted. You, me, every one of us, we think we're doing it for years, but we're few. We need to delegate to have more people. And I think this reverse engineering is making the other ones come to us, meet us again. We understand that Eurosonic, no offense, Oscar or Robert, whoever, Ripperband is great, but indeed, is it worth it for a starting young company, small label, to make so many expenses to go there, when now there are diffusion channels with conferences in Europe? We were not here. I mean, Athens Music is 7 years old. PIN is 11, but he was alone in the region, right? So Alive is 2 years old. Okay, looks like 5, 6 already, honestly.
Thank you.
Seriously, okay. Anka, MMB is 6 or 7 years old. And we talk about showcases, but as we know, showcases represent an infinite small part of the thing. Anyway, it's happening, but to go back on your initial questions, because I know we're going short, I think we had to believe in our power first, and remember that it takes time, because these other guys in Europe are doing this for 40 years. They have bigger markets, and geographically, they could take a car, a band, totally unfamous, could take a car and take merch. We could never take merch from Greece because we had to take the plane, you know? Now we can go by car in Bulgaria,
Schengen.
in Romania, finally. It's really new.
It is new, but it is also good because that gives us ground to. And one thing, yesterday I was in Berlin and we were presenting, very similar to this, but in a different context, we were presenting the region. And we had Ivan Petrovic from Exit who said something super interesting. And his point was, you know, we come from, we are basically a bunch of people in a bunch of countries and a bunch of organizations that we created something out of nothing. We don't have the education, like we don't have any of that. And we are survival mentality, you know, nations who now, after many years of struggling, of fighting, of doing conferences, events with, you know, little to no money and just some ideas and some you know, bunch of fighters, now when we actually are getting some funding, you know, imagine if that was like bigger, like European Creative Europe funds, if we were like getting more of that, what we could do. Claire, what's your thought about the future in this region? Do you think we have the potential to really become like a central hub?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the thing about stereotypes, stereotypes are based on two things, right? They're either based on truth, like British people like to queue, this is true, we talk about the weather all the time. Albania does unfortunately have an issue with serious organised crime, and then they're based on ignorance or outdated perceptions. And you can't get rid of that. All you can do is retell the narrative and own the narrative and put out a different message. And all you can do is increase the links that you have and people visiting countries and getting a new and updated knowledge. And that's why I think that it's important to root that in a sense of place, because I think it's difficult otherwise if something's too big and too unwieldy. Because if you really want it to work, you actually need to bring together the sector with the local authority, with the government and with local business. That's how you get really a joint message about why you should come somewhere and how you really get to put somewhere on a map.
Thank you so much for this. I also want to note that, yeah, perhaps, I don't know about the statistics of crime, organized crime in Albania, but Zagreb is the 6th safest city in Europe and Ljubljana is the 5th safest city in Europe. That's official
Tirana
statistics.
is one of the safest. I lived there for 3 years. It's incredibly safe because they export most of their organized
Which
crime.
one?
Tirana. Tirana.
Tirana, okay, sorry.
She was speaking about Ljubljana.
Yeah, so...
No, I'm just saying though, you know, even though Albania might have an issue with serious organised crime gangs, they export them. They've been very successful exporting their crime elsewhere.
I was
but it means
talking about
the
Zagreb
city.
and Ljubljana.
So other export office.
But I'm
Are they?
saying, yeah. But Albania is a very safe place, actually. But you know, it's well known for organised crime.
Except if you're driving. We're trying to debunk stereotypes and now I'm like pushing for some. It's a joke, of course. But I'm pointing this out because I also think some of the foreigners don't really understand. Like they think, you know, I get asked, like if I'm going to Skopje, is it safe? And like, it's much safer than...
Well, you know, when Casino Royale came out, there was an article in the Washington Post reviewing the movie that started off set in the fictional country of Montenegro. So, I mean, you know, there's some work to be done.
Some Serbs would agree.
I will dig that out. It's useful for all these topics. So we do have a couple of minutes left. Ian, how do you feel about the future of this region? Do you think we'll be seeing more of it?
Yeah,
I'm not putting words in your mouth. I hope you say yes.
Okay, I'll say yes, but with a little proviso, and it's something that I'm going to echo what various people on the panel have said. Music from the Balkans is music from the Balkans. It's not necessarily Balkan music, and that's exactly. And this is what I was talking about earlier about stereotypes. And I think it's really, really important because my experience of traveling a lot in different countries and different places, I've found fantastic music that isn't Balkan, it isn't Austrian, it isn't French, it's music and it's really, really good. And I think part of the problem is this thing that sits on top, the stereotypes we've all been talking about the Balkans, which elements and fragments of truth in there, but it's not the reality of what we are all working with in culture. And just because, I'm talking about music, but it could be a film or it could be dance or whatever, I think it's really important as part of the way to promote regional culture from the Balkans to promote this as music from the Balkans, or it's not Balkan music. I think it's really, really important because it's the kickback I always used to get from promoters when I was trying to sell certain artists was, oh, they're from the Balkans. I said, yeah, it doesn't matter. They happen to be doing this. And it just reflected a little bit of the mentality without it being spoken. It's that feeling that people have, and maybe there's a bit of prejudice there as well. And that's true of...
A bit?
I'm English, I'm diplomatic, mostly. We can say things in many, many different ways, yeah. So that's what I'd say. Yes, I think the more this is promoted and the more it gets out there, the more people from the Western countries and UK, etc., that come to places like this, the more chance there is of getting it out there. And it's really, really important, especially in a world which is constantly divided and ever more divided at the moment. It's music and culture that brings us all together. There you go.
I just wanted to add regarding the whole thing about Spotify. We had this survey, what are the most listened songs from Croatia, and 95% of them are foreign, are from US and England. So we have to think to ourselves, how do we perceive Croatian music? How internally, not like you have Croatian radio stations who play mostly foreign music, but then when you have a Croatian singing in English language, they don't want to put him on air.
Well, you've got really big dance acts like Vanillas,
Yeah.
who I've worked with as well, but they don't necessarily say they're from Croatia. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
And they, you know, don't
It's
make
better not to know where they're from.
Well, yeah, maybe. It should be, but that's not the way it goes.
I'm gonna say something now from my other hat, the artist, because people don't. When I go somewhere, they don't guess I'm Bulgarian because of the accent, and the second thing is because of my name Ruth isn't like it's not culturally connected to something. So I recorded an album in 2012 in the Netherlands with English, British musicians and Dutch musicians. That album sold very well in Japan. It started to kind of pick up. So I had a show booked in North Sea Jazz Club, which was a venue in Westergasfabriek in Amsterdam. The show is announced, selling really well. It's close to being sold out. And I received a call 1 week or 2 weeks before, 1 week before the show. And the promoter says to me, hi, Ruth, we just read your biography and we saw that you're Bulgarian. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And this is true, swear to God. He said, we don't want the venue to be filled with some Bulgarians. I swear to God, this is what he said. We canceled the show because it sounded like, and I think he was afraid that we're these Bulgarians who have bought tickets with, I don't know, stolen money in his mind would probably rip off the floor of the venue, or like, it just sounded like these are a bunch of cockroaches or rats. So for many years, the reason I speak English the way I do, perhaps one of the reasons for that, is that I was embarrassed. Many people from this region have been systematically embarrassed to say, I'm from Bulgaria, I'm from Romania, or I'm from any of these countries, because we don't want to be part of the stereotype. This is one story out of many. That's why I am doing what I'm doing, and that's why I showed these presentations, because I don't want other artists to be embarrassed. I don't want anyone to be embarrassed. My father is Olympic champion. I'm not embarrassed of my heritage. I'm super proud of it. But I have been put in a position where I don't want to explain myself and say, we're not dark-skinned and I'm not a prostitute. I've been asked when I was 19 if I'm a prostitute on the airport in the Netherlands. So this is something many people would tell you similar stories. Yes, George?
There are schmucks everywhere.
Yes.
But I remember my first job also in '98. It was with the ministers and people from Jack Lang, you know, the people who've changed so much the French cultural diplomacy. And anyway, a Turk come to sit next to me. So there are Czech people, Hungarian people from ministers, from cities, mayors and stuff. And the first joke is, and what do you have to say, George, with Levent? I was, 25, didn't got it. Then in the conversation, again, and what do you have to say, Levent, since you're sitting next to Georgian Greeks? And so on and so forth. People from the left wing, they were cultivated people. It wasn't the people from the 80s, which abolished the death penalty, gave rights to women and so on. But still, they had that not politically correct approach at the time, which was okay. And at the end, 25, I said, but you're German and he's French. How come you're sitting next to each other? I mean, let's not take too seriously some schmucks too. And things have changed. Let's focus on the change. And let's realize that we are 60 million, you said, 65, in the region?
Yeah.
And
Also,
we have Schengen, big airports now. We didn't have 20 years ago.
yes, and
Let's start
also
from there.
it's very important to see how Turkey can enter our countries because they can't. It's incredibly difficult now to get visas for Turkish musicians to even cross the border with Bulgaria. So
I think what's really important as well is the world changes and the world turns. Depending on what's happening in the world at this particular moment in time, Russians, and I've got several Russian people I work with regularly, artists and artist managers, Brits, because of Brexit, we need to fight prejudice all the time. Absolutely, it never ends, and it never will end. And I think
And we do the same unconsciously for others, by the way.
absolutely, absolutely. I think it's really important, and I think it talks to exactly what we're talking about now. It's remaining vigilant. Be aware when you're making a joke yourself. I make off-colour jokes from time to time, and I suddenly think, oh, I really shouldn't have said that. No, je parle français, c'est pas problème. No, but I think it's really important, and I think it's something that we all have individual responsibility for as human beings as well, that if we do that and we work on our unconscious bias, it's important. And it's a horrible story you've just told, but it's reality. And
it is a reality for many people.
Totally.
And when I'm telling it to,
No.
kind of fish for anything, the reality is that many people have experienced that.
Well,
and we see it very often. And I just saw it a couple of months ago at Reeperbahn where, one of the co-panelists was talking about that, you in the Eastern Bloc. And I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? I'm born in 1990. That wasn't even part of my life. So it's been a long time. It's time for us to really, start to be a global community, as I hope music and culture is the best way to go
Ironically,
about
as a Brit, we're very privileged, generally speaking, as Brits in this particular community, in the arts community. But since Brexit, there have been a lot of anti-British bits and pieces happening. I live in Europe most of the time. And then it's like, it's a bit of a wake-up call and think, actually, this can happen to anyone. Doesn't matter how privileged you are, we happen to be hostages to a certain sector of the population that voted a certain way. You can probably tell where I'm coming from with this. But it's difficult, and it's really important that we fight it and try to unmute the Balkans.
And you do that through knowledge and exchange.
Yeah, exactly.
And through
Absolutely.
working together. I think it's something that Bojan pointed out, and I think it's it might be more. We should do more. We definitely should do more. And all the initiatives, and this is a moment for me to kind of thank you all and praise the work that everyone has been doing. All the initiatives to educate, to create capacity, projects like New Faces, the one that was just announced yesterday with the support of the British Council, I think, which was Creative Gate. Then you have Kemi, Most. All our kind of unofficial partnerships between each other are something that really helps. So anyone here in the room and anyone part of this should continue to do it and really work towards it, because we're seeing results. It is reality. We are seeing results. So first, thank you so much for being with us. I don't know if we have time for any questions. No one really giving me a cue. Huh?
Can I add
Of course, we don't have time, and I am not embarrassed to say on my English that you will not unmuting the Balkans if you don't respect the promoter, that your time is over. So, thank you very much. Let's make a big applause to everybody.
I'm sorry, Bojan. You can take that to login.